welcome to Retro Warriors episode 297. As always, I'm your host, Justin Baker, and as always, I'm joined by resident old bastard, Chris Satter.
297 is a lot.
It is. It has a whole lot, and I felt like I sounded kind of tired when I said it, so I feel like it's
draining. It's a draining number.
Yeah, I'm like, welcome to I don't know, a lot. 200 and blah, and we're here. We have housekeeping. First up, still go listen to Cinema Rogues.
Yes.
Don't stop going to listen to Cinema Rogues. It's Guy's show. Also, Guy's here. Well, he's here every time we record, but he's going to be on this episode for his monthly producer segment.
For a minute there, I thought you were going to break into some, like, don't stop till you get enough Cinema Rogues.
Yeah, that was the original plan,
okay.
But then someone heard me try to perform a musical bit, and they were like, "Don't do that.
Don't do it."
Yeah, I'm not legally allowed. Anyway, Guy will be here after the ending theme, so please stay tuned for that. We'll remind you at the end of the show. My week, I've gotten back into the Digimon.
What?
I took a break.
Hold on. That implies you were not into it for a while.
Well, I wasn't running one for a couple weeks. As you know, there is much responsibility and obligation as they are a fun toy.
Yes.
So sometimes I'll get to where I like get annoyed having to take it out of my pocket 15 times a day, and I'll be like, all right, I'm gonna put them all up for a week, and then take them out, and they'll be exciting again. And so I'll take a break. You know, the same way people take breaks from like Harvest Moon or Animal Crossing or whatever. I'll drift in and out of it. But I did so. Without giving you too much information, because I am leading somewhere with this.
That's good.
I'm not just wanting to talk about Digimon. I swear. Without giving you too much information, some of them kind of release Pokemon style, where there will be 2 or 3 different versions, and to get all of the different eggs that can hatch all the different Digimon, you got to buy multiple versions of what is effectively the same device, right?
Yeah.
Which it's never too offensive because at least when they come out in the US, they're relatively cheap. It's not like you're buying 2 $60 games or whatever.
Right.
I bought one that was a 20th anniversary device and found out that you can hack it to have all the eggs from all the versions. The problem was it entailed not only soldering multiple microscopically small points, because as I'm sure you can imagine, these things are like
tiny,
the size of a mini Altoids can, so the solder points are tiny, but also desoldering them. And also, it entails doing lots of work on the device. So I had to raise 35 individual Digimon. I had to do combined 202 battles. And then I had to do the hack, right? So, and so I've been trying to solder. I've been doing the soldering thing. I bought a soldering iron. I soldered a new lever into my 8BitDo joystick, which is great. It was 5 solder points. They were big pads that soldered on just fine.
That. Yeah, that was good.
And I'm trying to get comfortable with the soldering thing, you know. So I was like, I'm gonna mod my Digimon. So I played it enough to get all the stuff unlocked. So basically, the way it works is you solder this point together, and it switches it to a different version, and then you unlock everything, and then you switch it to the next version, and then eventually at the end, you remove all your solder points to switch it back to the version that it actually is.
Do you have a solder sucker?
I do have a solder sucker.
Good.
But those things, I was going to say they suck, but it sounds like I'm making a joke, but they do.
Yeah.
But it took me a very long time, and I did end up ripping the speaker wire out of it, and I had to repair that, with, guess what, more solder.
Yes.
But I think it was my hardest soldering related project I've done yet. And so far it's still going. I'm terrified at the day that it loses battery and accidentally wipes my save, and then I lose everything.
Yeah.
But theoretically, as long as I take the battery out when I'm not using it, and when it shows the low battery indicator, swap the battery.
Right.
It should not do that.
Nice.
But that was my big thing this week. In addition to just still playing more Yakuza, was trying to get that thing all hacked. And I've got it, and it feels good. It's got all the devices. I hacked it into English because for some reason they made it all in English, and then they're like, now we're going to put it in Japanese and lock the English out unless you bust it open and solder 2 points together. I don't know why.
Weird.
It's completely weird.
Bizarre.
That they would translate the whole thing and then go, nah, never mind. You know, you can't. No one can have it. And then they didn't release it in English ever.
Nice,
so they just did it for fun, I guess. I don't know why.
It does feel weird that they put in the extra effort to translate it.
Well, here's the thing. They didn't even finish it because apparently, and I've not run into it, but people are like, yeah, some of them just have placeholder names. And I was like, well, that's fine because if they're in Japanese, all of them are placeholder names to me. So I don't mind having a few of them that are placeholder. So that would imply that they translated most of them, and then they were just like, well, we're gonna quit now.
Right.
They just
that was when they got the word from the higher ups that no, it was not releasing outside of Japan.
Yeah. I wonder about that. But yeah, so that was my big thing, was working on that project all week, and I finally got it completed today. I'm very, I feel very,
Nice.
really more than anything, I'm just excited that I opened it. Because in between, you open it, you solder one point, and then you have to close it back up and operate the device and do stuff to unlock the eggs from that version, disassemble the whole thing, solder one more point. It was this huge back and forth. It took forever. I mean, it didn't take forever. It took like an hour, but it's forever
for a soldering job. That feels like forever,
right? So yeah, that was pretty good. I'm feeling semi-confident with my soldering skills, which is something I've always lamented never really getting better at or bothering with, because it does kind of lock me out of a lot of kind of retro game and video game related mods and projects that you can do.
Yeah.
So that's been my week, was working on that.
I'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge that for at least a moment there, you thought that the size of a mini Altoids tin would be a better reference point than the size of a Digimon. And it might be.
You know, when you go to get Altoids, and you're like, I don't want to carry around the big tin. I want the mini Altoids. The small.
I just wanted to make sure that we didn't just let that slide by.
I guess I don't know. I keep all my Altoids tins because I use them for little things.
I've never encountered the many ones that I know of. I mean, I can guess how big they are based on.
They're about the size of a Digimon.
Yeah.
So just, whatever, whichever works for you, mini Altoids, Digimon, those are the two sizes we categorize things as.
I very rarely get mints anyway. I was always a gum person more than a mints person, so I was not much of an Altoids person.
I like mints because I have a thing where I'm a jaw clencher in general, like in my sleep and my everyday life, and I chew gum so hard that it makes my mouth hurt and it gives me a headache. Well, for many, because I can't not just clamp down on it.
Right. Yeah, for many years, I did nothing at all. In between meals or snacks or whatever, there was just drinks, and that was it. But then one of my dentists told me that they thought that I had dry mouth and that I should chew gum more often. So since then, I insistently chew gum because I'm paranoid that the dentist will say something mean to me again.
I know that, first of all, I like that the dentist saying something mean is, hey, here's some useful medical advice.
Yeah, that's scary.
Why are you hurting me? But I know you probably get like normal adult gum, but I just like to imagine you just have a bunch of full-size loose gumballs in your pocket. Like just a shitty
just a
25-cent machine.
Of Yipe Stripes gum.
Hey, y'all got any fruit stripe gum? I really want to not taste any flavor.
God, that was the worst gum ever.
What do you mean was? They still make it, don't they?
Oh,
I'm pretty sure they got that. I don't know. I'll have to look it up. We'll look it up later.
I finished Yakuza 3, and it was good. The ending got just crazy. I did not expect some of the twists and turns. I don't remember
the third time that you should have expected it.
Yeah, should have. Well, I felt like I saw the ending coming in Yakuza 2 a little more than I did in the first one.
Yeah. But 2 still had some twists. It didn't have as many as the first one. But.
And so I'm on Yakuza 4 now, and so I have an issue with it, which is that they reused the game engine entirely from Yakuza 3.
Oh, and 3 was already allegedly kind of dated feeling.
Yeah, it was pretty clunky.
Standards.
So the game engine itself doesn't bother me. I can get used to something that's being a little old. I still play old video games. That doesn't bother me.
What? Why would you play old, blocky looking video games?
I know, Mr. Sony. I just don't get it.
Who would want to do that?
Right. But I that part doesn't bother me. What bothers me is playing the two of them back to back and seeing literally the same environments, because they didn't change much. Literally the same animations when actions happen, the same mini games that play in the same way. Like there's little tweaks here and there that remind me, oh no, this is a different one. I did move on.
Yeah.
The big change from the last one to this one is at least for the first presumably 3/4 of the game, based on what it looks like, you don't play as Kiryu. You play as other people.
They Metal Gear Solid 2'd it.
So they introduce these other characters, and you get to play as them and see their side of the story first before presumably it will ultimately bring him back in and
Right.
put it all together. And the first guy is really charismatic and interesting, and was an exciting character to play because he has a different fighting style, and he's not a Yakuza person, so he has different motivations and everything. Really interesting. I really appreciated him. And then you get to the second guy, who is a former Yakuza who's been in prison for a long time, which is very similar to Kiryu's story, only for some reason he has this eternal mean mug on his face.
Yeah.
Where he just looks angry and mean at everyone. And it makes me not want to sympathize with him at all.
Yeah.
And I was several hours into his story, and I was just like, I don't like this guy.
Don't care.
He's just mean and angry. And then like some little kid does something charming, which like touches his heart or something. And you see him smile, and I'm like, oh, I don't like that. Go back to the mean mug.
Well, now you know why he's like that.
Yeah, so now I appreciate him more because I've seen what he could look like, and I wouldn't want to look like that either.
Like an up-resed PS3 character?
Pretty much. And now I have just started the third character, which is a police officer. And when I was playing Kiwami 2, I thought that that girl, Ayama, was the worst cop ever, and now I've met the worst cop ever.
I imagine it only goes downhill.
He makes
I'm playing
her
Yakuza
seem like
7,
a
and
great
let me tell you,
cop.
the cops they're, like
this guy is a cop, and he's told by his boss, like, hey, go out and investigate this thing. And as soon as you get control, you're like, well, I guess I better go hit the cabaret club and get drunk and then try to bribe some people out of money.
Yeah, normal cop stuff.
Yeah, just normal cop stuff.
Let's knock some news out.
Yes, sir.
First up, PS5 scalpers say they're tired of being seen as the bad guys.
Aw, poor
and
PS5
I have a solution for them.
Uh-huh.
Stop being the bad guys. Who doesn't fucking understand how this works?
Well, they say that they're just middlemen, and they're bringing a product to people that need it.
Yeah.
But the product
At
was
extreme
already
markup over MSRP.
Right.
Is that the rest of the sentence that they're not saying?
Well, what they're not saying is the product was already made available to those people until they themselves took it away.
Yeah, they're basically glorified line cutters. They cut in front of you in line and go, "Hey, you want this?" Like, no, not now.
I bought the last ticket, but I don't want to go to that show, so I'll sell it to you for 3 times the price.
I've seen multiple outlets run this story. Usually it focuses on this one specific PS5 scalping company. Yes, they are companies that do this. Really, it's just been circulating because the internet just has a hate boner for these PS5 scalpers, and I can't say I blame them.
I also have a hate boner for them because fuck them. Even if I was not interested in buying a PS5, still fuck them for just fucking up the whole market of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Atlas released a survey to know if players would like to see their games on Xbox.
We would.
But they only asked Japanese gamers.
Of course they did.
Who, not the biggest Xbox market there. I don't know if they realize that.
Surprisingly, there's not a huge Xbox market in Japan.
Play Mechanics and Mojang have announced a Minecraft Dungeons 4-player arcade cabinet.
Weird.
That is especially weird coming on a year when arcades worldwide have been struggling and shutting down.
Right.
And then they're like, I know what the arcade needs.
Minecraft
Dungeons? Because when I'm in an arcade, I want to play a decent but kind of watered down Diablo clone.
That's what you're after.
That's weird.
With Minecraft graphics. With 3 other guys standing next to you.
Activision co-founder David Crane, alongside other legacy Activision programmers, have formed Audacity Games to make new Atari 2600 games and possibly other games, but definitely Atari 2600 games.
I'm not against this. This could be interesting.
I'm not upset about it, but I wouldn't have asked him to do it.
No, but it could be really neat. I mean, seeing what David Crane has produced, specifically him. There were other people too,
Right.
But he made some great games on the Atari, and his games that he made after that, I was not really interested in. So if he's going to make new games, I want him to make that kind of game. I want him
Was
to make
David Crane the
simple ones.
Prince of Persia guy?
No, that's Jordan Mechner.
Oh yeah, I think you're right.
No, David Crane also did the original A Boy and His Blob. He also did some future Pitfall games, if I remember right. I think he was involved in some of those.
Yeah.
So,
Konami confirms that Super Bomberman R Online will be releasing on PC, Switch, PS4, and Xbox as a free-to-play game with cross-platform multiplayer.
I'm down. That's great.
Cool. It's still not my favorite Bomberman, but at this point, it's the most available and functional Bomberman
It's
as far as
neat,
online goes. So I can't say I'm upset.
Right? Yeah, I think I prefer Super Bomberman R over Super Bomberman R Online as far as multiplayer, but it is neat. It's different at least.
EU regulators approved the Microsoft acquisition of Bethesda, and Bethesda almost immediately was absorbed into the Xbox family. Multiple Bethesda games added to Game Pass. Not all of Bethesda's games. I assume there's some kind of... I assume there's licensing stuff behind the scenes that they need to detangle. Because, like, all the Doom games are available except for Doom 2016, which is weird.
Fallout 3 wasn't available.
I also saw a lot of people announcing games on Game Pass that have been on Game Pass for months.
Yeah, there was a lot of that.
So they released this big list of
Microsoft themselves announced it as if they were new releases.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know if anything's different, or maybe they just mean it's now been released as a Microsoft game.
I think part of it was that some of them, not all of them, some of them were already available. Some of them were not available on PC and were only on console or vice versa, and now they're all on both.
Right. So good. I like that. I played some Doom 64, and it was I feel like Doom 64 is a pretty underrated Doom game. It's really fun.
I played some Doom 3. That was still a game.
I installed it. I haven't gone back to it. I haven't played it since I was going to say since I was a kid, but then I realized that would make you feel extremely old.
It would, because I was...
when did that come out?
2004?
Well, yeah, I was like 14, 15.
I was
around
22, 23, somewhere in there.
Max Brooks, son of Mel Brooks and author of books like The Zombie Survival Guide and World War Z, has written a second licensed Minecraft novelization.
Weird.
Have you played any of these Minecraft novelizations?
You mean Red?
Okay, so I'm confused. He's not, because there are stories you can play in Minecraft that are like books that play out in Minecraft as like a Minecraft mod.
Is that what these are?
That's what I thought. This is him making a book of Minecraft.
Yeah, so far as I'm aware, this is his second novelization book of Minecraft.
I see. In my head, I read it as backwards because they had something free on Minecraft last month that was like called The Mountain or something, and it's just literally like a walking simulator
that's what
in
this
Minecraft.
Is called too, so maybe it is both, or maybe I also got it backwards.
Or maybe the Mountain was just to celebrate that releasing. I don't know, but I don't. Cool, I guess.
Yeah, it's weird to me.
I mean, I don't know.
But it's Max Brooks. It's got to be pretty good.
I can't really say that I understand Minecraft as much as I do enjoy Minecraft as just like a crafting, building, goofing off game. I don't think I understand it anymore.
Yeah, I think I came into it too late. I didn't understand it, and then the second that I put it down, there were patches that changed things, so I never went back to it.
Chocobo GP trademarked in Australia, further hinting at a possible new Chocobo racing game.
I'm totally down for that.
That's cool. Yeah,
that first one was great.
Nintendo Japan is officially discontinuing repair services for the Nintendo 3DS after running out of parts. So don't know what you want them to do. They don't have the parts. They'll fix the NES until like 2007.
Yep.
Oh, but 3DS, we quit making them last year and then we ran out of parts.
I don't even know, because like if only they could.
Look how exasperated you are.
If only they could get in touch with whoever it was that made the 3DS and ask for more parts.
I'm sorry, are you implying that Nintendo is going to contact someone and say, "Hey, we sold all of something. Can you make more?"
Good point. I forgot about that.
I'm not sure that they know that that's an option. Polymega's business license has been suspended in California. putting into question if the product will ever be released. I think it will.
Yeah.
And they on their Twitter they were like, "Oh, it's just some clerical error," and I'm like, "Yeah, but that you shouldn't let those things happen, guys."
Yeah.
You know,
I am still thinking about buying one of their TurboGrafx controllers.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like this is one of those things where it's really dumb and doesn't bode well, but at the same time, I feel like it did get kind of blown out of proportion with people being like, they'll never sell it. Like, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
.emu and Tribute Games announce a new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles brawler game.
How excited are you?
I'm very excited for this game because there have been many brawlers since the 16-bit TMNT era. They were on Xbox. There has been a bunch of them.
Yeah.
This one is very much cribbing from that Turtles in Time era, and it does appear to be a fully new game. So I think, oddly enough, in the last few years, brawlers have entered possibly, I don't want to say a renaissance, because I feel like the stuff coming out now, like River City Girls and Streets of Rage 4 and stuff, are so much better than the old ones, the old brawlers, that I would really want to refer to it as a golden age. We're in this weird brawler golden age.
A resurgence.
Where like suddenly people understand what makes them fun. It's not just you walk right and punch people. There's other nuance that makes it an enjoyable game in the process.
There is?
And so I know that it shocks you. So I'm very excited for it. I'm very much looking forward to it. Sony and Denuvo announced that Denuvo Anti-Cheat will now be available to developers of PS5 games. Oh, boy.
Oh, boy.
Fuck. God.
Damn it.
I guess it's better than that time Sony just straight up installed rootkits on people's computers. But
That's true, but only barely.
Yeah, it really is only barely.
Yeah.
Roblox goes public, valued at $38 billion by the end of the first day, and
Speaking
I
of
still don't
things
know
that I
what
don't
a
understand.
Roblox is.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
Right?
I watched a video one time because I was like, what the fuck is Roblox? It reminded me of that like Club Penguin from back in the day.
I don't know what that is either.
And I still don't understand it.
Yeah, I thought I didn't understand Minecraft, and then I heard of Roblox, and then I realized there are things I really don't understand.
NVIDIA rumored to be stopping production on the Tegra X1 chipset.
That could be a big deal.
Which a lot of stuff uses that.
And most notably, the NVIDIA Shield, which is their set-top Android box, and the Nintendo Switch. That's the two most notable things.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
I mean, if anything, that would be the biggest confirmation of a Switch Pro that we've had so far.
Now, that said, they could be discontinuing production because they have a giant pile of them, for all we know.
This is true.
So,
Microsoft to discontinue OneGuide on Xbox One consoles. For people that don't know what that is, we used to get TV over the air, and you could pipe that into your Xbox, or really cable or satellite, which are other antiquated forms of media consumption that you could pipe into your Xbox and use it as basically a TV guide kind of thing. Oh, TV guide was a thing you would look at to see what shows were on. I feel like we're down a rabbit hole. It's gone now.
Now, I was so upset with OneGuide. It was such a step backward from Media Center that was already on Xbox 360.
Yeah.
Because Media Center, you could record things, you could use it as a cable box, but OneGuide required you to connect in a other unrelated cable box first.
Right.
And that was just wonky and awkward.
I know that it was never really a beloved feature, but it's frustrating that they would remove it from devices.
Yeah,
where people may still be actively using it.
You can still use the pass-through on it to just view whatever is plugged into your HDMI input, but you will then have to use the guide on that other device. I think the only thing that would
kind of defeats the purpose at that point.
I think the only thing that would completely have lost its function in this is if you had bought one of the Xbox One TV tuners. I don't know if that will work anymore after this.
Interesting.
But we'll see.
And finally, Samsung aggressively positioning OLED technology across multiple sectors, including the games industry.
Yeah, I think that's Samsung trying to say, we really want to be on the next Switch.
Yeah, I could. Yeah, that's what I feel like as well.
Right.
Because I feel like OLED has become much more common in phones already.
Oh, yeah.
But I feel like this is them specifically being like, hey, Because, I mean, Microsoft's not going to do anything, and the Vita 2 ain't coming anytime this century, so that's basically, and the 3DS is dead, and they can't even make it anymore because they don't even have any fucking parts. So, obviously, yeah, they're talking about the Switch.
Are you saying that I should go cancel my pre-order for the Vita 2?
I'm saying that I'm just glad you're holding out hope, so at least someone is. I wasn't even holding out hope for the Vita 1 a month after it came out.
Right.
Like, it was... But without further ado, let's get into the topic at hand. This week, we're talking the Sony PlayStation.
Speaking of consoles that Sony just dropped and ignored a month in, wait a second.
Which you may remember as the failed CD-ROM add-on to the Nintendo
Justin,
Super Famicom.
What? Not that one.
They showed it at the E3 or whatever.
Not that one. The other PlayStation.
One guy found one.
Yeah, we already did that. We did that.
This is the fairly successful first home console produced by Sony that led to the creation and eventual dominance of the PlayStation brand. Yeah. As far as first encounters, I knew of the PlayStation when it was a thing.
Yeah.
I became aware of it probably whenever Croc 2 came out.
Wow. That's one of the weirdest things I've heard you say, yeah.
Because I remember, I want to say 96. Mm-hmm. What is 96? I don't remember the exact year, but I was trying to decide if I wanted to buy a PlayStation or a Nintendo 64. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I've told this story on the air before, but the two games that were like, I was like, all right, do I want this game or this game? Because that's what's going to decide. It's the games. And it was Croc 2 versus Mario 64.
Pretty much the same game.
Yeah. And so that was the first time I remember ever being aware of the PlayStation. I didn't own... I bought the N64, obviously, because Croc 2.
Yeah. So that would have been in 1999 at that point.
Oh, wow. Was it that late?
That's when Croc 2 came out, was 99.
Really?
So the year before the PS2.
It may have been preview coverage.
Possibly.
So it may have been as early as 98.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, granted,
still
in
2 years
98,
after Mario 64 came out.
Right. Well, in 98, I was 10 years old. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't necessarily comparing game consoles when I was like 7.
I totally was. I was a freak. I was all about that.
But I never owned a PS1 until after I owned a PS2. And then I got a PS1 in high school, which would have been about 2005. I got one from our editor Pablo, actually. And I played a bunch of games on it, but it was way late. I didn't have a PS1. I had friends that had PS1s. But then when the PS2 came out, the couple of PS1s I saw around quickly disappeared and were replaced by PS2s.
Right. Yeah. They either got sold or shuffled into cabinetry.
Right. For sure. But yeah, so I was very much late coming to the PS1 and thus have almost no nostalgia for it whatsoever.
That's also so weird to me.
Which is like, I have more nostalgia for the PS2 and the original Xbox than I do the PS1.
That's so weird to me.
It is weird. Somehow I ignored the PS1 entirely.
Yeah, I had followed its development, but before it came out, I just thought it was going to be another blip, just another thing. I was like, well, that's another not Nintendo or Sega console, so I don't need to really pay attention to it. I already got bitten once by getting a TurboGrafx. And so I wasn't, super paying attention to it. And then when it came out and everybody was acting like it was a big deal, and Blockbuster filled up a whole section with it, I was confused. And then my neighbor picked up one sometime in 96, and he got a copy of Tekken and Ridge Racer with it. And I went over to his house and checked it out and was like, well, that's really impressive, but I don't want to play either of these games.
Right.
So it was a little while before it was late 97 before I really started playing PS1. And then from late 97 until the PS2 came out, it was definitely my most played console.
Yeah. Saturn, tell me the release information for the PS1 because I was barely alive.
Yeah. So in Japan, it came out on December 3rd of 94 and it cost 39,800 yen, which is adjusted for inflation only 41,377 yen. Japan has had some deflation problems over the years that makes this a weird comparison. So it would have been about $379 adjusted for inflation. The North American release was September 9th of the following year in 95 for $299.
I was in first grade then, just to set the stage.
You know, I gotta say, the consoles that came out when I was in first grade, I was still interested in. I was still following that shit.
I just don't think I've said it before. Like in our house, like video games were like, it was like the fridge. It was like, oh, that's the Nintendo. Like I'm convinced that because my brother was an obsessive and still is an obsessive. And so I'm convinced my parents shielded us from a lot of it.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want to go through the rigmarole because they knew that we would be just going nuts for the stuff.
Because I'm trying to do the math, and I want to say 88, 89, which was the era that the Turbo and the Genesis came out, is when I was in first grade, and I certainly I remember anxiously reading news about that.
Yeah,
but,
I feel like my parents shielded us. Possibly. I really do, because they were like angry that we wanted a new Nintendo that was the Super Nintendo. They were angry about it. They were like, "What do you mean you have a Nintendo?" It was, you know, and we're like, "No, it's a better Nintendo." And I remember that it was a battle. We really had to fight for it to get that Super Nintendo. So I feel like they probably shielded us from a lot of it.
Yeah, my dad was not sold on this whole new Nintendo thing after already having the old one. But then my mom saw some pictures of the new Zelda, and she was like, "We do need the new Nintendo."
Yeah. Well, with your parents enabling,
yes,
it was probably a little easier path for you at the time.
So North American release September 9th, 95. It was $299 American dollars, which adjusted for inflation would be $520.55, which is not that different than the PS5, honestly. That's pretty spot on. The European release was September 29th of 95. It was 299 pounds. It was 1,490 francs or francs. It was 599 Deutschmarks, which I can find.
In my head, I'm like, let's just do euros. And I'm like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
The 90s.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was about 500 pounds adjusted for inflation, which is close to $700 adjusted for inflation. I was not able to find easy inflation calculators for pre-Euro French or German currency, unfortunately.
Yeah.
The Australian release was a couple months later, November of 95. The PS1 redesign came out in Japan in July of 2000, which was 4 months after the launch of the PS2 in Japan. And in North America, it came out September 19th of 2000. Europe was September 29th, which was less than a month before the release of the PS2 in those regions. So just a little bit of time there. And then they finally discontinued the production of PS1 hardware March 23rd, 2006, which is shortly before the launch of the PS3. So, so it was in production for over a decade.
I do want to talk about kind of the state of the game industry in this era.
Yeah.
Because it's very different than it was even in the late 90s.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was just a very weird time. There were lots and lots of systems on the market and entering the market at the same time. It really did feel like this big flood of, like, you've got the 3DO and the Jaguar and the Saturn and the Super Nintendo and the PlayStation and all these systems of
CDI. There's all these different handhelds too. Is
systems of radically different technological capability, of radically different lineups and aims and pointing themselves at different markets.
Really, what we should have been doing was the math, because as Atari told us, 64 is greater than 32.
It was just weird. Like, I was looking through magazines, and like Earthbound was being advertised on the same spreads as like Ridge Racer and Battle Arena Toshinden were being reviewed.
Right.
Like in my head, and it's because again, I'm younger than you, so in my head, like, it was always like, 2 or 3 game consoles and they were all kind of fighting each other. Like, that's how video games have always been to me. But and that's why I really want to drive this home for people that might be my age or younger. And it's that this was this era where we were just exiting Nintendo mania, where everyone was like, oh my God, video games are a huge untapped market. And then every company rushed in and they all got crushed out and then they were gone. And it was this weird, like like 1992 to like 96, and that it was just those few years there, and then it was just everything else was gone.
Yeah.
Like in 1997, no one was like, "Oh yeah, the fucking 3DO, man."
Well,
Let me tell you.
Even during that time, even the established companies that had successful products were still trying to cram shit on the market. You had Sega releasing the Genesis, the Genesis 2, the Sega CD, the Sega CD2, the 32X, the CDX, the Game Gear. You know, they're just anything they could get on the market to try to get more and more of the market share. And that's, you know, in addition to all these smaller companies, or at least less successful companies, that were also trying to get some of the gaming pie. And so when all of that is happening at once, and then, you know, stereo maker Sony shows up, like, we're also gonna video games. Nobody knew to take that as seriously as they should have beforehand.
Yeah. Like in all because I was reading magazine coverage because I was like, oh man, there's going to be big PlayStation launch issues, and then I was going to go read them. There are none.
No.
Everyone's like, oh yeah, the 3DO and the Neo Geo and the Jaguar and stuff, and they're like, also fucking Sony's doing something, we guess.
Yeah.
And it was very disorienting to read in this era of now, and I'm so accustomed to a new game console's coming out, so there's going to be 15 launch issues all about this game console. Like the PS1 launch issues would be like, yeah, here's like a page on it. The PlayStation 1's out. Anyway, we were playing the 3DO last week, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
What bizarro land am I living in?
Let me show you Road Rash on the 3DO. Oh, also Ace Combat came out on something called PlayStation. Yeah,
I did also find a great interview with GameFan in September 1995 of Steve Race, who was the then president of Sony Computer Entertainment of America. And he stated that the PlayStation is, quote, Sony's biggest launch since the Walkman.
That might be true.
They knew by the data from the Japanese launch that the system, quote, skews older than Nintendo, and he thinks it will skew older than the Genesis.
Which was probably true in retrospect.
And of course, this is them kind of speculating, but he ended up really kind of being right in these things.
About a lot of it, yeah.
For sure. I did also find in the same interview, he said that they were asking him about mascots, because of course this was the video game mascot era.
Oh, yeah.
He said they were fooling around with Polygon Man,
and that was
the
mascot for PlayStation for a while.
Was that weird gray head?
Yeah, the purple head thing.
I was trying to figure out what game that was from. I was like, why is this dumb head on all this PlayStation coverage?
No, it was just, that was their mascot for a while. And I believe it's the final boss in PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, isn't it?
Saturn, nobody played that. Nobody even knows the name of that game anymore. Now it's not even a joke anymore. Now it's just like, the what?
But no, I think that was the final boss in that game, was the old Polygon Man mascot that they briefly used in 1 year there.
Weird. Let me fire through some basic hardware specs, then we can get into the real meat and potatoes, which is the controller.
Yeah.
Has a 32-bit LSI Logic Corp RISC 3000 R3000 at 33.86 megahertz and 30 MIPS. Sound is a custom Sony sound chip. You've got 2 megabytes of system RAM, 1 megabyte of video RAM, color depth 16.7 million with 32 levels of transparency. Screen resolution varies between 226 by 224 or all the way up to 640 by 480, which is a lot. It took standard CD-ROMs, as it's famous for. Copy protection was accomplished via wobbles written into the disc's grooves.
They thought they were so smart with that.
SRAM is 1 megabyte memory cards, which are capable of saving 15 blocks of data, sold separately. And network, you couldn't connect to the internet or anything, but there was the serial port on the back that you could use for certain games that supported multiplayer connections.
We'll talk about one of those next week.
And there were several hardware variations released over the years. I think the original one just had straight AV and S video jacks in the back, and then eventually they switched to the little unified connector and stuff. And the
unified connector was on that first model too. It's just there was also the RCA jacks, and so everybody used those instead.
And then this is where things get weird. The controller. It was very much a Super Nintendo controller, because remember, young people know joysticks on it.
Yeah.
And they just changed the buttons to triangle, circle, cross, which is what it's called, not X. Cross.
I'm still going to call it X.
And square.
Well, they also added additional L and R buttons, and
They
they extended the grips that you would hold the controller with.
So in Japan, in Japanese culture, a circle is okay or correct.
Right.
And it was meant as the confirm button.
Yes.
A cross, an X, means no or failure. And it shares symbolism with the strike symbol used in baseball internationally, and it was meant as the cancel button.
Right.
And thus began the age-old discrepancy between Japanese and Western PlayStation games, where they would flip back and forth between which button is okay and which button is no-K.
Almost
because you couldn't tell.
Almost every launch title in all regions used traditional Japanese input buttons. In fact, most games released on the PlayStation in its first few years used the Japanese buttons, and the ones that didn't seem to have any consistency at all. It was pretty common to see games where if X was the enter button, then maybe the cancel button would be triangle for some reason, or it would be square, and there would be very little consistency as to what was enter and what was cancel, until I would say probably 98, 99 is when it started to be cemented in the West as to a standard option for everything.
Yeah. Square was meant to represent a menu or option screen. Triangle was meant for camera or viewpoint control, because obviously everything's polygonal now.
Right.
After the N64, Sony did release the dual analog controller,
right,
which was supposed to be optional.
Yes.
First games compatible with the controller were Squaresoft's Tobal 2 and Bushido Blade.
Right. And
in November of that year, following the release of the Rumble Pack for the N64, Sony revised the controller again with DualShock. And this one looked similar to the dual analog, but had convex analog sticks and longer L2 and R2 buttons in addition to the obvious built-in rumble.
Right.
And it would go on to kind of be the standard remembered and then eventually iterated upon version of Sony's controller.
Yeah, and it was packed into the consoles almost immediately. All the new PlayStation consoles were rebranded as PlayStation DualShock Edition, and it would have that controller.
I do remember when I had my PS1, I went to get an old controller, another controller. I have a second player controller, and I remember being like, why the fuck do some of these controllers not have analog sticks? How are you supposed to use them?
Well, a lot of early PS1 games won't recognize the DualShock. If that's the only controller you have and you try to start the game, it's not going to see it even as a controller. That was what that stupid mode button was for in the middle of the DualShock.
Yes, and I remember not understanding why I had to use this dumb. I'm like, why do I need a mode button? Granted, keep in mind, this is post PS2 that I'm playing this thing. And I was like, what the fuck do I need why? Why do I have to turn this on sometimes for my game to work?
Yeah.
It was very disorienting.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about the development of the PlayStation.
Well, let's real briefly. We all know about the Super Nintendo CD-ROM. We've
the what?
Yeah, we've talked about it to death.
I think we've done like 2 episodes on it.
Well, we did at least one dedicated episode. It was episode 95. Was all about that. So we can just mention it happened and then it didn't happen, and there was some bad blood there. And so after that, Ken Kutaragi, who was a Sony executive in charge of hardware engineering and is now known as father of the PlayStation, he had convinced the rest of the Sony leadership to continue this PlayStation project despite Nintendo pulling out. They were not very... They were lukewarm.
Sony didn't want to.
Yeah. They didn't want to spend any more money than they already had, but they would let him play around. So he went to Sega to ask them if they wanted to do it. He pitched almost the same thing to them, but he said, well, let's make it a standalone 32-bit CD-ROM console, Sega and Sony working together, making this machine. And according to Sega CEO Tom Kalinske, well, then Sega CEO Tom Kalinske, the board of directors at Sega rejected the idea outright, despite the fact that Sony was then known as makers of the Walkman and the Trinitron and several high-end audio and video devices. Kalinske had said that the Sega board members are quoted as saying, Sony doesn't know how to make hardware.
You know, some days I agree with them, if I'm being really honest. But yeah, that seems pretty boneheaded.
Yeah, there were also concerns about their software front, but if they were working with Sega anyway... Sega would make the software.
Well, it's okay. Sega was banking on the 32X at the time, so that's the new. That's it. What do we need the PlayStation
needs
for?
Anything else?
Sega will be making consoles forever.
But yeah, so they once Sega shot them down, the Sony leadership was not too certain about pursuing this any further. They didn't want to venture into the video game market alone because people might forget, but they were already publishing video games through the Sony Music label. Stuff like Hook and Mickey Mania and Sewer Shark was already being published on Super NES and Sega CD.
Some real killers there.
You know it. Some real winning games there. So they were already dabbling in the software market, but they weren't making any big splashes, nothing significant. So they were not real confident about this. But the president of Sony, Norio Oga, he agreed to everything after he was reminded of Kutaragi's embarrassment by Nintendo when they basically betrayed them at CES that year.
Right.
He was like, "Oh no, my boy Kutaragi, he needs to get revenge. We need to give him a chance." And so that was what led to Sony actually paying for the whole thing. They wanted to distance themselves from the failed Nintendo collaboration. So instead of just calling it PlayStation, they started referring to it internally as PlayStation X or PSX, which is where that abbreviation that is still used comes from.
Yes. The stupid abbreviations that don't make sense. GameCube abbreviation, PlayStation abbreviation. They don't make sense.
No. Apparently, Sony focus group tested the name PlayStation in North America and Europe and found that their potential customers thought that name was too childish. And so they were planning on actually calling the console PSX everywhere outside of Japan. It was going to be called PlayStation in Japan, and everywhere else was just going to be called PS-X.
You know, in retrospect, Sony calling it the PlayStation makes as much sense as them calling it the Walkman.
Yeah, pretty much.
You know, I mean, they sound like household names now. They don't feel weird in the mouth today, but at the time, like, it plays tapes and you walk around with it. It's the Walkman. Men can walk with it and listen to it. It's this PlayStation. It's just the station that
you play in.
You play at. It's very weird.
Yeah, it was a weird name for a game console too. It might as well have been called Game Console.
Right.
But no, they obviously decided to keep the brand. And they were aware of the situation like we discussed earlier with all of these different consoles on the market, and they had already seen how a lot of these considerably powerful consoles like the Jaguar and the 3DO were not doing well. So Sony immediately started trying to enlist third-party support. Before the console release, they already had long-term contracts with Namco, Konami, and Williams Entertainment, which were three of their strongest partners really early on. And of course, also they eventually got the deals with Square and Enix and all these other companies. But they still wanted to have some in-house development that was better than, Mickey Mania or Hook.
How do you get better? I just want to know what you think they could even do, Saturn.
Yeah, so they bought Psygnosis. They actually bought them back in '93, a year before the console released in Japan. And Psygnosis is well known for games like Wipeout and Lemmings. But despite the fact that Sony bought them, they kept making games for the Saturn and N64 as late as '99. So it's kind of like how Microsoft is doing now with Minecraft, where it is something they own, but they still publish it wherever. They don't care.
Right.
Put it everywhere they can.
They're just raking in the cash.
Right. Psygnosis reportedly was influential in the development of the hardware. The co-founder of Psygnosis was a guy named Ian Hetherington, and he called the early test units for the PlayStation not fit for purpose.
That's my new insult. Next time someone upsets me, I'll be like, "You're not fit for purpose." Yeah.
And he refused them. He just turned them around. He wouldn't even take the dev kits. They made their own out of less expensive hardware. And those dev kits that Psygnosis made, they went on to make 600 more of them that Sony would then distribute to everyone else. That became the standard dev kit, was the cheaper one. And because this cheaper one was what they went with, they also revised the actual specs of the final unit to make it cheaper to fit those specs and to reduce the retail costs too, since all the developers were using these weaker dev kits now.
Right.
And former Sony Computer Entertainment Europe director Phil Harrison, who you may remember for launching the PS3 and the Xbox One, and his current work at Stadia.
Oh, that Phil Harrison.
Yes.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
The guy that wanted to make us not be able to buy used games,
That's
work
the
a second job to buy a PS3, or thought Stadia was going to work.
Yeah, I think he was also the one that said, if you don't like the Xbox One, we have a console for you, and it's called the Xbox 360.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so he had said in interviews at the time that one advantage that the PlayStation had over its rivals were the robust development tools that Sony offered, as well as additional software support like full programming libraries, which is true. That is something that a lot of the third-party developers have cited as something useful and worthwhile in the system.
You're telling me Phil Harrison told the truth?
Briefly, before the launch of the PS3, he may have been a competent executive at one point. But yeah, they actually had staff.
He's not fit for purpose at this point.
He is not. That is true. I hope his business card says that. It's like, Phil Harrison, Stadia, not fit for purpose. But no, they had staff in Tokyo, California, and London that would specifically offer support to developers in those regions. So if you got a Sony dev kit and you were making games on the PlayStation and you were like, this is confusing, or I don't understand polygonal graphics, or what is a controller, you could call them and they would give you personalized support.
And now Stadia just auto bans developer accounts because they don't know why.
Yeah, pretty much the natural evolution of that.
Yeah.
Kutaragi, the head in Japan, he had said that the initial goal for PlayStation development was to make the system high performance, low cost, and easy to program for. And he feels they succeeded at all of those things. And based on interviews with other developers, I would say he's probably right.
Yeah, I mean, for such a rocky start for a system, I mean, from it being basically a failed CD add-on to what ended up being a rival company's product, to one of their people they brought in to help them with it being like, no, this is trash. They turned that ship around.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah, by the time it launched, it was in solid shape.
As far as release, the PS1 launched in Japan a week after the Saturn in December 1994. By the end of the year, the PSX had sold 300,000 units compared to the Saturn's 500,000 units.
A little weaker.
The Western launch fared better, mostly due to costly mistakes on Sega's part, like them saying, hey, the Saturn's available now.
And not telling half of their retailers, and then those retailers getting pissed off that they weren't the ones that got it on day one.
I don't know how. Well, I do know how, because we've talked about it before on the show, but I just don't understand what the fuck Sega thought they were going to do.
My favorite thing was at that very first E3 back in 95, when Sega had their big announcement, and they're like, this is the Saturn, it's available now, and it costs $399, and they were all excited about it. And then Sony came up, and that dude just walks up to the microphone and says, $299, and then walks away. That was that was a moment made for television before they televised E3.
Despite the early release of the Saturn giving the console a 5-month head start, the PlayStation outsold Sega's console in North America within 2 days.
Yep.
Because people knew about it. Sega, they knew about it. Within a month of the European launch of the PlayStation, it had outsold the Saturn by a factor of 3 to 1. Oof. Within its first full year on shelves, the PlayStation secured over 20% of the North American video game market. And again, keep in mind how fragmented the market was in that time.
And also, during that year, it was still being outsold by both the Super Nintendo and the Genesis.
Yeah.
So it was that's not bad.
It just came in and basically crushed out all of the companies that weren't going to hang in the market for the next several years anyway.
Right.
Fast.
Yeah.
In all Western markets, Sony used incredibly aggressive marketing tactics to ensure they received as much or more attention than Sega's consoles, taking a page from the same playbook that Sega had used against Nintendo 5 years earlier with their marketing pushes that helped them secure early wins.
Oh, yeah.
So again, going from a system that they're like, we don't want to make this, to just crushing everything but the biggest competitors out basically immediately.
Yeah, well, they clearly were targeting specifically Sega. going out the gates.
Yeah.
And part of that is because the N64 didn't launch for another year. So they had a year to get a head start.
I also feel like market-wise, Sega was from the beginning like, hey, you know, this is for the older kids. This is the serious gamer system. Yeah. And I feel like they were wanting to cut into video games, but specifically into that part of it. Right. They're like, no. We want to be the cool older kid video game system. And Super Nintendo can have the kids, but we want the rest.
And that absolutely worked. Throughout the late 90s, they had that market.
For sure. Let's talk notable releases. Gran Turismo was the highest selling game on the console at over 10.85 million units sold. I would not have guessed Gran Turismo, but in retrospect, it does make sense. Right. It felt like literally everyone who ever was even near a PlayStation was like, yeah, I got Gran Turismo. Games available at launch in the U.S. You have Air Combat, also known as Ace Combat in Japan, which still continues to today.
Oh, yeah.
Battle Arena Toshinden, that beloved
does not
video
continue to today.
ESPN Extreme Games. I've never even heard of this game. Kiliak, the DNA Imperative.
I had to look that one up too because I didn't remember it at all. Kiliak, I believe. And it was a first-party game, and it just looks awful.
WikiLeak, the DNA Imperative. NBA Jam Tournament Edition, Power Serve 3D Tennis, which sounds like a tech demo that comes with Windows Vista. The Raiden Project, which has nothing to do with the Raiden games or Raiden from Mortal Kombat. I don't really know what it is. You have Rayman.
Yeah.
Now, which is Rayman.
If I remember right, it is just Raiden. It's the shooter Raiden, if I remember.
Oh, is it? Okay. So. For some reason, I thought it was not related to the shmup.
Yeah, actually, it might be a collection of them.
Okay, well, that's good. That's a good launch. Yeah, I like that.
It was a good game.
You have Ridge Racer.
I'm sorry. I believe it's pronounced Ridge Racer.
Yes, which is that still going? Does it still making those? They made like 7 or 8 of them. 7 was on 3DS launch.
There was one on PS3. I think there had to have been one on PS4 at some point. I don't know.
You got a fighting game. You got Street Fighter the movie.
Yeah, Street Fighter game. Real bout on film.
Oh God, no! That was their only fighting game at launch.
That was.
You have Total Eclipse Turbo, which sounds like a version of Street Fighter 2. I don't, and then you have Zero Divide. I don't know like half the games on this list.
Yeah.
I don't fucking know. They're not remembered. For the PlayStation had this weird thing where it launched, it had some notable games, and then a few years later, it really came into its own as the system that it wanted to become.
Well, also within a couple of months, you had Ridge Racer was at launch, but within a couple of months, you had Tekken, and that was the other huge game early on.
And as the PlayStation took over the market, people started moving to it. We had a lot of major franchises that moved to the PlayStation, which include Contra, Castlevania, Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, Metal Gear, Mega Man X, Tekken, Ridge Racer, EA Sports, like basically all the big non-first party Nintendo and Sega stuff was like, yeah, we're moving to PlayStation.
You know, like the EA Sports games were also on Saturn, but that didn't help the Saturn. But they were also on the N64, but they always seemed to come out a year later on N64 than they did on PlayStation. So it became the de facto EA Sports console for people who wanted the new EA Sports games.
Yeah. Major franchises that got their start on PlayStation include Crash Bandicoot, still going today, Spyro the Dragon, dead and gone, but they remade it. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, dead and gone, but they remade that. Resident Evil, still going. Silent Hill. I'm sorry, Saturn. Siphon Filter. People, does anybody remember Siphon Filter? I feel like I've been bringing it up lately. They made them all the way up to the PSP.
Yeah.
Anybody remember the Siphon Filter on PSP? It was called like Dark Fate, Dark Tomorrow, Dark Knight Returns, Dark Siphon Filter, something like that. Gran Turismo, Twisted Metal. They a lot of huge franchises got started on the PlayStation. And
there's plenty more that I forgot to put on that list too, I'm sure.
Right. That kind of dovetails us into the reception for the PS1. Because at launch, and I was reading reviews of the PS1, it had a positive reception, but it was not overly positive.
Right. Probably because of that game lineup.
Yeah, that game lineup, like, it's not bad. Like, I think you have to keep in mind that, like, looking at it on paper now, that launch lineup, it looks pretty rough.
Right. The people I knew that really desperately wanted one at launch, the games they were after were NBA Jam and Battle Arena Toshinden. That was it.
Yeah,
that was the things people wanted.
There and Toshinden got a ton of press coverage, at least till Tekken came out.
Right.
So it's this thing where it looks like a kind of anemic lineup for us, but you have to keep in mind so many other systems are launching.
Oh yeah.
And they're launching with nothing because the whole market has no fucking idea what to make its games for.
Right.
So launch lineups of the era were just kind of weird and wonky.
Right.
But basically by Final Fantasy VII, the PlayStation had hit its stride. It had become the de facto sports machine. It took that title from Sega, presumably. Yeah. It had become the de facto JRPG machine, a title it kind of stole from the Super Nintendo. Yeah. And it had become a first-party powerhouse with some really good showings.
Yeah, and also it became the adult console with stuff like Resident Evil. It was pretty quickly taking all these different niches and bringing them together to get a really strong audience.
Famicom Tsushin rated it lower than the Saturn.
Right.
Next Generation Magazine were positive, and Entertainment Weekly said that it rivaled Nintendo and Sega's systems.
Yeah, which it did. That's true.
Yeah, and the PlayStation and PS1 combined sold 102.49 million units worldwide.
Oh, yeah.
It ended up being a tremendously successful system that came from nothing with a relatively bad lineup in one of the most hectic eras in the video game industry for hardware.
Oh, yeah.
And it came out shining like a diamond.
When I was working in video game retail, so this would have been between 01 and 04 in that era, it was still selling strong. Used ones, we were selling consistently. Even new PS1 models, we were still selling pretty regularly. And the games were just constantly coming on and off the shelves, especially to people who were looking for budget games or people who are lower income families. This thing went from being a premium price at release to being incredibly affordable. New PS1 consoles were selling for $49 for a while there. And the games, you were getting new games coming out for PS1 in 02, 03, 04 that were retailing for $10. So it became a great console for people trying to save some money.
It was this thing where it felt like the PS1 enjoyed the same kind of market that the NES enjoyed, in that eventually, like, the market was flooded with it. There were tons of them, and the new thing was out, but the old thing was still fine. I mean, there were plenty of people that bought NESs after the Super Nintendo was out, while the N64 was still out. That they were just like, look, we just want to spend like $100 and get like a system and like a big stack of games and just have fun, you know. In basically what the GameCube was in the early Wii era.
Yeah. And one thing we didn't mention that Sony did during the PS1 era that you didn't really see prior was greatest hits. That was a huge thing.
A big deal.
Because prior to that, even when Nintendo put the stupid little Player's Choice ribbon on Super Nintendo games, they were still full price.
Yeah.
Nintendo wanted you to know how well this game had sold, and please give us $70. Thank you very much.
Oh, that's funny because they've never stopped doing that.
I know. But
your price isn't. Well, they I guess they did Player's Choice on GameCube. And they had some 3DS ones. It seems like they're successful systems they don't do that on.
Right. Weird.
Strange.
But Sony, in the middle of all their games doing incredibly well, was like, hey, we're going to re-release the best-selling games, and we're going to make them $20. And then a few years after that, they said, just kidding, they're going to be $15 now. And that was huge and helped move a lot of consoles and a lot of games.
Right, for sure. Let's talk legacy. Because the legacy is still ongoing, it feels kind of silly, but obviously they made other PlayStations.
At least one.
The success of the PS1 led to optical discs being the obvious standard for video game media. And it certainly wasn't the first optical disc-based system by a long shot, but it was the first one that really had mainstream appeal, and it tied pretty closely to the rise of optical discs as a storage medium of choice for computers.
That's true. Yeah.
Which I think like 93 was when Myst came out. Wasn't Myst like the big CD-ROM push game?
Yeah, that was a big one that sold some CD-ROM drives.
So like the PS1 and CD-ROM drives in home PCs, like they rose in tandem.
Also,
it
Myst is
like.
on PS1 if you really hate yourself.
Yeah. PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3 both closely emulated the DualShock controller of the PS1.
Right.
They're both fully compatible with PS1 format software. Although you do need a PS1 memory card on the PS2.
Right.
So I think it says a lot that the PS3 is not, depending on your model, necessarily compatible with PS2 games, but it will still play PS1 games. PS1 classics were made available on PS3, PSP, and Vita for digital purchases of original PS1 games. There were 250 titles made available via that service, including some that had never been released before in certain markets.
Yep. That's how I was able to buy Money Puzzle Exchanger in the U.S.
There you go. The PlayStation Classic came out in 2018, and it sucks.
Yeah.
Saturn wrote that it came out like a wet turd sliding down Phil Harrison's leg.
Yep. It was not fit for purpose.
It was not fit for purpose. The people were very excited for the PlayStation Classic, and they really just fucked it up completely inside out.
Yeah.
Thankfully, hacks have fixed most of it, but what has not been fixed is Sony's D-pad design. What are you doing, Sony? Can you give me a real D-pad?
Okay, first of all, I would like to clarify.
It's been a long time.
That of all people I have learned, you were the worst person to critique a D-pad. Because apparently you don't know how to use it and you only hurt yourself with it. So as somebody who played a shit ton of PlayStation and PS2, I can say that I have played a ludicrous amount of fighting games on the PS1 before it had an analog stick.
I don't know.
And it was fine. In fact,
it was not fine, Saturn.
Many of my friends at the time insisted upon it to the point where I had to get an adapter for my Saturn so that they could plug in a fucking PlayStation controller, like they were trying to insult my Saturn with their shitty PlayStation controller.
Split D-pad designs were made by the devil in hell. That is my final take on that.
It's not the worst. It's not the best. It's far from the best, but it's usable, but it's not what I prefer.
As far as final thoughts, I liked the PS1 a lot when I got one way late, such that I have no nostalgia for it. I still don't like the controller. But man, the PS1 was such it's one of those, it's like saying you don't like the PS1 is like saying you don't like the PS2. It's like, well, there's about 1,000 games on it, so surely there's something there you like. It may not have your favorite game of all time, but it probably has something, or at least something very close to what you want. You know, it was just so massive that it's hard not to enjoy at least some PS1 games that they won't put out on other services. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Please, Sony, give us the games.
Yeah, I played a ludicrous amount of PS1, and personally, speaking of the controller, aside from select games on the Saturn, it was my preferred controller during that era. I liked it infinitely better than the N64 controller, and I liked the diamond-shaped face buttons for a lot of games. Like Resident Evil plays way better on a PS1 controller than it does on a Saturn.
The N64 controller having a D-pad is the
it's the male nipple
example
of controllers.
It's the number one example of malicious compliance that I've ever seen in my life, where Nintendo's like, fine, we'll fucking put it on there. We'll put it on the side. You're not going to use it. I'm like, what?
My favorite is the manual that shows, like, grip 3, hold the D-pad and analog stick. No one's ever going to do that, Nintendo. Ever.
Yeah, gee, thanks, Nintendo. Let's release a modal controller. What the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah. But no, I played a ton of PS1 during its life and afterwards. When I first got my PS2, I didn't buy any PS2 games for almost a year. I just continued to play PS1 games on it because they still held up well enough that you could keep playing them even on a PS2. And there's just so much on that console that is worth going back and visiting if you haven't before.
And you know what's also worth going back and visiting is our Patreon.
Is weird segues.
Patreon.com/Retro Warriors. And you can get cool things like early uncut versions of this show where you can hear my internet fuck up in the middle of it and I flub a bunch of stuff. And then we have to pick it up from where we left off.
Yay.
You can also get Talking Wizards, which is weird. And you can also come chat with us in Discord, which you should do.
Because that doesn't cost
basically
anything.
Hang out. It does not cost anything yet. I'm always scared that Discord's gonna like pull some rug out from under me.
Seriously.
Because I know I'd pay it.
I'm already paying them.
And this specific show was brought to you by the following patrons: Adam Williams,
Casey McGinty,
David Nethery,
Ebusel,
FreeCodeCamp.org, Quincy Larson,
Ivan Cervantes,
John Fry,
Kevin Donlin,
Lee Sparks,
and Matt Kovacs.
Are all the people we want to thank for their wonderful support that they give us.
That was the most calm and ordinary patron list we've had in possibly
I was thinking
years.
that. There was no like weird things.
There was no weird sexual innuendos. It was weird.
You're right. It was a sad one. And if you would do us a favor and go rate and review us on whatever you listen to us on, I don't even know anymore. We're back on the Google.
Yay.
So you can get us on Google Podcasts. Google was like, oh, hey, we'll fix your feed. They didn't tell me. I just went, I've been checking it every week, and it would be wrong, and I'd yell at them and send them an angry email, and then eventually they fixed it.
I was on the Google, but then I went to a doctor and got off the Google.
Well, there are Google patches they have that you can wear.
Right. I had to
go
wean
get
myself off.
Go get your Google methadone. I imagine it's just a smartphone, but it's just a piece of wood. Like it doesn't actually do anything, so you can like hold it and tap at it.
I feel like Google Methadone is the next product they're coming out with.
Anyway, do stay tuned. After the end theme, our producer Guy is going to be on the show for his monthly segment. We're very excited to talk to him. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week. And as always, let us cling together. Party. We're here with our producer Guy, who I didn't confirm was actually present and on microphone. Guy, are you there?
Cricket noises.
Oh, excellent.
I like that you wrote it into the notes as, hey, it's Guile.
Yeah, and now I'm singing like the Monkees theme song, but with that.
Hey, it's the Guy-O. He comes
basically
on the show
that.
Sometimes.
How you been, Guy?
Not too bad, you know.
I
say as if I don't play D&D with you every week and do a show with you every 2 weeks.
When he asked how you were doing, I really, really wanted you to say that you were too busy singing to let anybody down.
Just keep the musical number going.
Yeah, Justin
Don't
Hush
let
now.
it stop.
Justin Hush now. Is Guy's turn. Not really. I don't know.
How are Guy things?
Guy things are good. I kind of wanted to follow up on your Talking Wizards graveyard story without spoiling it for people who haven't heard it.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
My girl, your story is funny because my girlfriend is a monument designer, right? She designs tombstones and.
I'm okay. You said monument designer, and then I was immediately baffled, and then you explained it.
Yeah,
and now I'm speaking for no reason.
Right? It's mainly tombstones, but it's also you're a host. It just comes naturally to you.
That's true.
Interrupt and add your little bit. She, excuse me. She does mainly tombstones, but also has like other, like she's got some sort of like children's memorial thing out in Crowley or something. You know, just various things around that she's been contracted for. But it was a funny story about how like you're like creeped the fuck out, and your daughter's just like, "This is great. I love graveyards."
Oh yeah, to give the Cliff's Notes versions of that story I told on Talking Wizards. Basically, we were driving home one day and my daughter saw a graveyard and she loves Nightmare Before Christmas, and she made me go walk around this graveyard with her for a while, and she's like, "Is there a dead person in that one? Is there a dead person in that one? Is there a dead person in that one?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's all full of dead people. It's where we all end up at the end. It's where we're all gonna go." And she's just fine, and I'm having like this existential crisis.
It's great. But like, I went to, I guess a couple years ago, my ex-wife took the kids to Disney World, right? For Christmas. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, shit, what are we going to do on Christmas then? And Kristen's like, you want to come with me to a graveyard? I was like, I mean, I don't not want to do that. Sure, let's go. For Christmas, we'll go visit a graveyard.
Why not?
So we went to this graveyard in Dallas, and we found like Lamar Hunt's grave, who's like an NFL owner, like one of the original NFL owners in the AFC. You guys don't even know what I'm talking about. But anyway.
No idea.
It's a really famous graveyard out there. And there's a lot of really cool art, and I didn't realize that until I went walking around the graveyard.
Nice.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I've walked around many graveyards. My wife likes them, and knows some people have died, and so like I've been to graveyards before. But yeah, some of them are surprisingly nice. Yeah. Like you don't realize till you get there, and you're like, this is actually really nice. The one I went to with my daughter was not. It was the scary, spooky kind of graveyard.
See, I personally still associate graveyards with the holidays because growing up, my grandparents lived in this really teeny tiny town, and it had no shops. It had no entertainment whatsoever. It was just houses and church and graveyard, and that was it. So
hey, your grandparents lived in the town I live in?
Now this was about 3 hours south of Dallas.
Okay.
So and the population in the town was just under 700 people. So it was a really tiny
that's the
town.
population in my town.
Did they have a police force?
No, they had one guy.
Yeah. We don't even have the one guy. We just have no one.
His name was Jim. But no, so because the town was so small and because that was the only thing to do, anytime that we would finish dinner or that we had time until dinner or whatever, and the kids were bored and they told us, hey, go outside, my cousins would say, hey, you want to walk down to the graveyard? Because they also lived in that town. And it was the one thing to do, so we always did. And we would just walk around and be like, hey, what's that person's name? That's a dumb name anyway. And just comment on it. And it was an old graveyard too, so there was stuff dating back to the 18th century. And and it's just weird. That's still, anytime that the holidays come around, I'm like, I should go roam around a graveyard in some random city. So yeah, I can get that.
Yeah, I recommend it. I didn't realize how like pretty a lot of the monuments and things are. Like we went and sat inside like a I don't even know what it's called. I will probably get slapped for that, but whatever. Like this little like remembrance chamber with like family like vaults and shit.
I will now call them remembrance chambers, just so you know.
The only graveyard terminology I have is mausoleum or ossuary, and I don't think it's either of those.
Remembrance chamber.
Reflection room. That's what it's called.
Oh, there you go.
That's also a weird name.
That's the house of mirrors in the middle of the graveyard.
The reflection room. Come on, kids, come on down to the reflection room. Just 5 tickets.
Just wait till you find the water temple.
It's a graveyard. You're like, ow. Well, that's cool. That sounds like a neat job.
Yeah.
It is. As far as I know, I mean, she draws pictures and then turns them into real things. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
When you first said that she designed memorial, how did you phrase it?
Remembrance chambers.
Was it memorials?
Monuments.
Monuments. Thank you. That's the word. When you said that she designed monuments, my first thought was like in Civ 3, the little obelisks that give you more culture. I was just like, oh, she develops culture.
Can she make a remembrance chamber for the TurboGrafx for Saturn?
It's important.
I mean, if you're going to pay for it.
I'm sure it's affordable to have a giant concrete room in your apartment, custom designed. With
that's
just probably fine.
With just a sculpture of Bonk in there.
And typically what it is, it's like this benched area, and then like on the opposite wall from the benches is like layer after layer of where you would like put a full ass casket in, so it's like for generational type things. So I don't know. What else would come with the TurboGrafx? You have like a PC Engine spot too.
Well,
I mean, let's be honest. Saturn's house is already basically a TurboGrafx mausoleum.
Right. You'd need an oversized TurboTap to connect to your other 5 remembrance rooms.
Yeah, all your mini remembrance rooms in your remembrance chamber.
I remember.
I always find the weatherproofing in graveyards to be interesting because like they do things where they like make gravestones, but they have like color pictures of the person on them or like just little things that they do that it's like, oh yeah, we want this to look nice, but it's also literally going to be in the Texas elements 24/7 feasibly for hundreds of years, and we want it to look nice for that amount of time. Right. And just seeing like weird things encased in like resin and acrylic and stuff just so that it lasts forever.
Right.
Is always oddly interesting to me. I think I just like weatherproofing in general.
I liked all the really old ones that had these intricate structures. They were starting to chip away a little bit, but you would see much more intricately designed statues and stuff on the older headstones than you would on the newer ones. The newer ones look pretty bland in comparison, at least back then.
I imagine, prices have gotten crazy.
That's true. There's that.
Dude, the funniest side effect about her job is, how like when you watch a show that has to do with your like career, you're like, no, that's not how that works, right?
Right.
Or
zombie movies just like the worst for her?
Anything with a graveyard, she's like, no, that's plastic. No, that's foam. No, that's like fucking particle board. I don't know.
Nice.
It's great.
In real life, that would be 70,000 pounds. You can't clobber a zombie with it.
Not even that. It just looks like cheap as shit. And, whatever. She's like, usually in movies, you'll see they'll have, like, if they're going to show the name, then it's a real gravestone. But if not, then everything around it's some, like, bullshit foam and it looks like ass.
Yeah, I never would have noticed that. Weird.
That's one of those things that once you do notice it, you can never unnotice it.
You're welcome, listeners.
It's also the same thing if you've ever watched a movie with a person that knows about guns.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, they ruin literally every movie ever, because basically every movie has guns somewhere. I've learned this. All of them have. They'll be like, "That's not what that sounds like. That doesn't work. That wouldn't look like that. That wouldn't work like that. He would shoot his hand off. He would shoot his foot off. He would shoot his friend." Like,
honestly, I enjoy movies more that way. I want it all ruined.
Does it enhance it for you?
Oh yeah, I love that.
The pedantry just makes it better.
Yeah. I love being able to mock the directors while I'm enjoying the story. That's the best.
Yeah. Anyway, what else you got for us, Guy?
Cinema Rogues is going well, I guess.
Nice.
How you guys did I Care a Lot, which just sounds like a Care Bears sequel. I think that was the most recent one you've released, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the most recent one we released. I'm pretty sure Care-a-Lot is the name of the place where the Care Bears are from.
Yeah, that's the kingdom that the Care Bears live in. Although I think you have to refer to them as Care Bears and Friends now, because they include a lion.
Oh, there's also an elephant back in the 80s.
And an elephant.
Those are the Care Cousins.
Yeah.
Okay, I see. But they're integrated with the regular Care Bear society.
Yes, but they
live in Care-a-Lot.
They came from a different place, I'm pretty sure. I need to go back and rewatch the Care Bears movies, I guess. I
just feel like maybe we should just refer to them as Care Animals instead of Care Bears, because they're, that I don't want to cut the lion out, or the elephant, or the whatever else I don't even remember the lion and the elephant, and the rest were bears. I remember too.
Yeah,
and there was one Care Bear whose entire job was just to be fucking grumpy and not actually give a shit about anything.
Yeah,
which goes against his entire name. He's like I don't care
his name
bear.
Was Grumpy Bear.
I know, and he was an ass.
Grumpy Bear's the best bear. I'm with Saturn.
I had a little.
No, the best bear is the green one that I don't remember the name of or anything about.
Lucky Bear?
Obviously,
I had a plush Grumpy Bear when I was really, really little, and I fucking loved that thing.
I want you guys to know, you may not know this, because Guy, you don't have small enough children, and Saturn, you do not have children, but they still make Care Bears cartoons.
Weird.
And they're, I to call them low budget implies that they have a budget. And I don't think that they go into it with a budget. I think they go into it with, like, what's the minimum amount of CG animation work we can do to make a viable product? Great.
You're saying they plan at least as much as we do for this show.
Yeah, I'm just saying they're not good. And yeah, man, Care Bears were like, I don't know if it was an age thing. I know they were big in the 80s.
Yeah.
But then they were real big for me when I was little. And although because I remember I watched the Care Bear movie a ton. And then I also watched that one movie that had Michelangelo, Bugs Bunny, and a Care Bear trying to get that kid to stop smoking cigarettes.
That CBS after school special?
Yeah, they had it on tape at my local video store, and I rented it all the time because I was like, look, Michelangelo's friends with a Care Bear. Like, it just blew my mind.
The tape that I constantly rented that drove my parents insane was Madball's Gross Jokes. Yeah. They tried to make a cartoon based on Madballs, and
what the fuck are Madballs?
Yeah, I'm lost here too.
You don't remember Madballs?
No.
They were like little foam balls, roughly the size of a baseball, and they had these bizarre and disgusting faces.
Oh, by the time I was aware of them, they were monster faces. So it'd be like a Frankenstein.
They had some of
and a
those
vampire
early on
and-
too. But the
Okay.
yeah,
Well, yes, I do remember them.
But they were called Mad Balls. That was the name of them, and they were successful enough that they tried to make a cartoon spinoff, and they did a pilot, and then they did a direct-to-video comedy special, and they're both just awful, and they're both only available on VHS. You can't they were never shown on television. And for some reason, the Gross Jokes VHS I just constantly rented, and my dad hated it so much. But
Dude, I tell you what,
You guys
90s cartoons
ahead.
aren't good.
yeah, I want to say this was like 87
Oh, no.
or 88. So this was pre-90s.
Well,
Okay,
the 90s card.
the further you go back, the less
Yeah,
good
that's true.
cartoons get.
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah.
We were watching. We burned through the new DuckTales like real quick,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Oh man, old DuckTales does not hold up. Don't go
No,
back.
I did. I tried.
Leave it alone.
Oh,
Let it be
man.
dead.
We watched one episode, and I was like, "No, this is awful. Holy crap!"
Yeah, don't. It's real bad. Even the old DuckTales movie, I tried to go back to it too, and I was like, oh man. Also weird gender stuff, like where they're really enforcing heavily the well, she's the girl
Yeah,
duck.
she was
Oh
wedded.
yeah.
Like with weird enforced gender norms. We just boring, honestly, is what it was. Old DuckTales, fucking boring today. I'm sorry. You know what does hold up good? G.I. Joe is still fun to watch today. I don't know what makes it. I think it's the ridiculousness of Cobra Commander, not only his personality, but just as everything about him and his operation.
I love his voice.
Is so fucking ridiculous. Like, it's just literally a man wearing a sheet on his face, shrieking at a guy with a metal face to go.
I love it
it's
so
so
much.
dumb. Transformers does not hold up either. It's not.
I'd just like to say that I looked it up, and they still make Mad Balls, and they are still called Mad Balls, and they even
say I'm
still
shocked.
make the same characters that I remember from childhood.
Well, they haven't designed anything new
Probably
for him in
Now I
decades.
gotta Google
Yeah.
this guy.
And they've got Screamin' Mimi. He's the baseball with a face, and there's
Oh no, it was basically Garbage Pail Kids,
kind
but
of
balls.
And then there's the one that's a mummy for some reason, and
I had the mummy.
Slobulus that has his eyeball hanging out, and Hornhead.
Oh, I had some friends that had these. I didn't know that's what they were called. Okay.
I
Yeah.
fucking love those things.
Guy, thanks for being on the show.
Okay. Bye.
We appreciate you, and we appreciate our time with you.
Yeah.
But
you
unfortunately, our
better
time with the
cherish.
listener has come to an
no.
end.
What? It's only
So we're
been an
gonna-
hour and 47 minutes.
I know. I got to do another
I
one
don't
of
know
these
why I
tonight.
expected you to break into the closing Mickey Mouse Club song there. The Now It's Time to Say Goodbye.
Anyway, thank you for listening. Thank you for being here, Guy. We'll see you guys next
Bye.
week. Good night.
Good night.